There are seasons in life when progress feels invisible. You show up, you try, you give your best, and yet nothing seems to change. It's in these quiet, unnoticed moments that most people quit. But what if the real transformation happens not in the spotlight, but in the shadows of repetition? This story will show you why consistency, though often overlooked, is the quiet force behind every lasting change. In a quiet village nestled between hills and rivers, there lived a potter named Eli, whose hands shaped more than clay, they shaped his destiny. In a quiet village where the river hummed lullabies to the hills, there lived a man named Eli. He was a potter, one of the last in a world that had moved on to faster, shinier things. His workshop was a modest hut with cracked windows and shelves lined with clay vessels, each one shaped by hands that had known both patience and longing. Eli worked in silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had said it all through his craft. Every morning, before the sun rose, he would light the kiln, knead the clay, and begin again, day after day, year after year. He dreamed of creating a piece so beautiful, it would outlive him, a masterpiece that would whisper his name long after he was gone. But the world rarely noticed. His pots sold for coins, if at all. Children passed his shop without looking, and though he never said it aloud, Eli wondered if his life's work had any meaning. Still, he showed up, because something in him believed that maybe, just maybe, consistency would lead him home. The first time someone bought one of Eli's pots was a young woman named Mara. She held the vessel in her hands like it was something sacred. "It feels alive," she whispered. Eli didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, heart thudding like a drum in his chest. That night, he stayed up late, shaping clay with a new kind of fire in his belly. He began experimenting, adding curves where there were once corners, carving stories into the sides of his pots, letting his hands speak louder than ever before. Word spread slowly. A merchant asked for a dozen pieces, a traveler took one across the sea. For the first time, Eli felt seen, not just as a potter, but as a creator. The village children began peeking into his shop, curious eyes wide with wonder. He still rose before dawn, still working in silence, but now, each movement carries a quiet pride. He believed, perhaps for the first time, that his dream was not foolish, that maybe, just maybe, he was on the edge of something beautiful. It happened on a winter morning. The sky was pale, the air brittle. Eli had just finished glazing a batch of pots, his finest work yet. He lit the kiln, as he always did, and stepped outside to gather wood. But something was wrong. A crack had formed in the base of the kiln, unseen and growing. Within hours, the fire roared too hot, too fast. Eli rushed in, but it was too late. The kiln exploded with a thunderous cry, sending shards of clay across the workshop. Months of work gone in seconds. The walls were scorched, the shelves broken. Eli stood in the smoke, heart hollow. Word spread quickly. The merchant canceled his order. Villagers whispered that Eli had lost his touch. Children stopped visiting. The silence returned, heavier than before. Eli didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply sat among the ruins, staring at the broken pieces. In his hands, he held a fragment of a pot, once whole, now jagged. And in that moment, he felt it, the sting of failure, sharp and unforgiving. Eli couldn't sleep. The sound of the explosion echoed in his mind like a cruel reminder. He returned to the workshop the next day, hands trembling, eyes hollow. He began again, not with hope, but with desperation. He tried to recreate every lost piece from memory, pushing his body beyond its limits. He refused to rest, refused to speak, refused to feel. The kiln was rebuilt in haste, the wheel spun endlessly. But the pots came out wrong, misshapen, cracked, lifeless. Eli smashed them one by one, blaming the clay, the fire, the world, but never himself. He stopped opening the windows. The light felt intrusive. He stopped greeting neighbors. Their pity felt poisonous. He was drowning in the past, clinging to a version of himself that no longer existed. And yet, every morning he showed up, not out of courage, but out of fear. Fear that if he stopped, he would disappear. That if he let go, he would lose everything. So he kept spinning the wheel, hoping to rewind time. But the wheel was broken, and so was he. One rainy afternoon, Eli sat outside his workshop, staring at the puddles forming in the dirt. His hands were stained with clay, but his heart felt empty. That's when he saw him, a hunched old man with a walking stick, pausing at the doorway. The man stepped inside, eyes scanning the broken shelves. He picked up a small cup, one Eli had discarded for its crack. "This," he said softly, "is my favorite kind of cup. It reminds me that even broken things can hold warmth." Eli looked up, confused. The man smiled. "I once knew a potter who believed perfection was the goal. He died chasing it, but the ones who drank from his imperfect cups remembered him forever." They sat in silence. The rain tapped gently on the roof. The old man left without buying anything, but his words lingered like incense. That night, Eli held the cracked cup in his hands. For the first time, he didn't see failure. He saw a story, a beginning, a truth he had forgotten. Beauty isn't flawless, it's honest. The next morning, Eli didn't rush. He sat quietly, watching the light spill across his workshop floor. The cracked cup still sat on his table, untouched. But something inside him had shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. He picked up a lump of clay, not to fix, not to prove, but simply to feel. His fingers moved slowly, like they were relearning the language of creation. He didn't aim for perfection, he aimed for presence. Days passed. Eli began shaping pots again, but this time with gentleness. He opened the windows, let the breeze in, played soft music. He smiled at the children who peeked in. He even kept the flawed pieces, placing them on a shelf labeled Lessons. His kiln burned steady. His wheel turned with rhythm. And though the world didn't rush back to praise him, Eli felt something deeper. Peace. The kind that comes not from applause, but from alignment. He was no longer chasing a masterpiece. He was becoming one, slowly, quietly, through the beauty of showing up. Years passed, and Eli's workshop became a quiet sanctuary. Not for fame, not for fortune, but for peace. His shelves were filled with pots of every kind, smooth, cracked, carved, simple. Each one told a story. Each one held a piece of him. Travelers came from distant towns, drawn not by advertisements, but by whispers. They said Eli's pots felt like home, that when you held one, you remembered something you didn't know you'd forgotten. Eli never chased recognition again. He woke each morning with the same rhythm, kneading, shaping, firing. His joy was no longer in the outcome, but in the act, in the silence, in the breath, between movements. One day, a child asked him, "Which one is your masterpiece?" Eli smiled, pointing to the wheel. "That," he said, "because it never stops turning." He had become what he once sought, a vessel of quiet strength, shaped by discipline, softened by failure, and fired by the beauty of consistency. There's a quiet kind of strength in those who keep showing up, not for applause, not for perfection, but for the simple and sacred act of becoming. Eli's journey reminds us that transformation doesn't arrive with fanfare. It grows in silence, in cracked cups, and broken wheels, in the courage to begin again. So if you're tired, if you feel unseen, if your efforts seem invisible, remember this: consistency is courage in disguise. Progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Healing begins when you stop chasing and start embracing. Discipline is the bridge between failure and rebirth. Let go of perfection. Choose presence. Your masterpiece is not a moment. It's a journey. Even broken things can hold warmth. The wheel never stops turning, and neither should you. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And above all, keep showing up. The clay is waiting.